The first inkling of war often comes not with the roar of bombs or the rumble of tanks, but with the silence where words should be. In September 1939, as German tanks rolled across the Polish plains, millions of families around Europe began to experience a sudden, unsettling void. Letters stopped arriving, postcards went missing, and telegrams carried only fragments of news. Postal systems, which had once been the arteries of human connection, now buckled under the immense weight of a world at war. Soldiers stationed in distant fronts, civilians scrambling through cities teetering on the brink of occupation, and governments attempting to coordinate massive armies all confronted the same relentless question: how to communicate when the very channels of connection were threatened. In the opening months of World War II, postal services faced logistical nightmares on a scale previously unimaginable. Cities were being bombed, rail lines destroyed, and borders shifted with terrifying speed. In France, a civilian could mail a letter one day only to find, a week later, that the post office had been captured or relocated. In Britain, anticipation turned to anxiety as families waited for news from loved ones who were sent abroad in the first waves of mobilization. Postal workers themselves became unsung heroes, navigating streets littered with rubble, dodging falling debris during the Luftwaffe's blitz, and improvising delivery routes in real time. Every letter delivered was a triumph over chaos, every returned missive a grim reminder of the uncertainty of wartime existence. Censorship quickly became a fundamental feature of early wartime correspondence. Governments feared that unmonitored letters could reveal critical military information, compromising entire campaigns. In Britain, the Ministry of Information took control of civilian and military mail alike, carefully inspecting letters for potential breaches of security. Soldiers were instructed to avoid mentioning locations, troop movements, or operations. Letters might be redacted or held for days before delivery, yet officials were mindful of the importance of morale. A letter could carry as much emotional weight as strategic intelligence, and maintaining the human connection between home and front was a silent but powerful weapon. Germany, Italy, and Japan enacted similar measures, with military authorities scrutinizing correspondence to prevent leaks while still allowing soldiers to maintain ties to their families. The delicate balance between security and humanity became a defining tension of early wartime communication. Logistical challenges went far beyond censorship. The volume of mail exploded as nations mobilized their populations for total war. Millions of soldiers were being deployed across Europe, North Africa, and Asia, each needing to write home, receive packages, and stay connected to a life suddenly interrupted by combat. The traditional postal system, designed for peacetime efficiency, could not handle such an unprecedented load. Railways, the backbone of mail distribution, were frequently disrupted by bombings or commandeered for troop movements. Ships transporting mail across oceans became targets for submarines, while airfields were threatened by enemy raids. Every step of the delivery chain was vulnerable to delay or destruction, yet the postal networks adapted, employing mobile sorting units and temporary post offices near the front lines to ensure that, against all odds, mail continued to flow. For soldiers, letters were more than a convenience, they were lifelines. Each envelope represented hope, a tangible reminder of home and normalcy. In the mud and blood of the Western Front or the burning deserts of North Africa, a letter could sustain morale, providing comfort that the world beyond the battlefield had not disappeared entirely. Families, too, relied on these letters to know that their loved ones were alive, to share mundane details that became extraordinary in the context of war. Births, illnesses, small victories, or the simple act of remembering someone's birthday, these minor details became monumental in significance. The postal system was, paradoxically, both fragile and vital, capable of crumbling under attack but also capable of sustaining the human spirit. The early years of the war also prompted creative innovations to manage the swelling demand and perilous conditions. Microfilming, later popularized as V-mail in the United States, began as a concept to condense letters, reducing bulk for transport and protecting content from interception. These tiny reproductions of letters could be shipped safely across oceans or front lines and then expanded for delivery at their destination. In addition, a network of mobile field post offices followed armies, ensuring that even soldiers in newly captured territories could send and receive correspondence. Air mail became critical for connecting continents, shrinking what had once been weeks of transit into mere days, though aircraft themselves were constantly at risk from enemy fighters or anti-aircraft fire. The war did not only challenge the delivery of mail but also its reception. Civilians and soldiers alike faced the anxiety of delayed, lost, or destroyed correspondence. In occupied territories, postal networks were often co-opted by enemy authorities, making neutrality and confidentiality nearly impossible. Resistance movements adapted, creating clandestine courier systems to ensure messages could bypass official channels. In France and the Netherlands, couriers would transport messages across towns under the cover of night, often at great personal risk. These efforts illustrated the critical intersection of postal systems and intelligence. Letters were not merely personal communication, they were instruments in a broader struggle for information, control, and survival. Even with these adaptations, early war postal services were a daily gamble. Mail might take weeks to reach its destination, with entire batches lost to enemy action, misrouting, or administrative failure. Each delivered letter was a triumph over the chaos of a world at war, a testament to the resilience of human ingenuity and determination. Postal workers, both military and civilian, were quietly heroic, bridging the chasm of uncertainty and fear that enveloped entire nations. Their work underpinned the morale of soldiers, the stability of governments, and the cohesion of societies fractured by conflict. By late 1940, the importance of postal systems had become widely recognized, not just as a tool of communication but as a pillar of wartime infrastructure. Governments invested heavily in maintaining and expanding mail delivery networks, developing mobile units, air transport routes, and censorship protocols. Civilian cooperation, from purchasing postage stamps to volunteering for auxiliary postal work, became part of the war effort itself. Letters were coded, routed, and rerouted through complex networks designed to outpace destruction and uncertainty. Through these networks, war was recorded, emotions were shared, and human connections endured even amid destruction. In retrospect, the early war period demonstrated that communication was as essential as ammunition or food. Postal systems, though often overlooked in the grand narrative of World War II, played a decisive role in sustaining morale, transmitting critical information, and preserving the bonds of family and community. Every letter delivered across battle-scarred landscapes was an assertion of normalcy, a fragile thread holding together the fabric of a world in upheaval. Soldiers and civilians alike came to understand that the simplest messages, words on paper, could carry profound significance, bridging continents, cultures, and the vast distance between war and home. In those first critical months of the war, the postal system was more than infrastructure, it was a lifeline, a symbol of resilience, and an unsung battlefield where courage, patience, and ingenuity were tested daily. Innovation under fire, V-mail, mobile sorting, and air mail. As the war surged into its second year, the sheer scale of communication demands forced militaries and governments to innovate at an unprecedented pace. Soldiers were scattered across continents, oceans were perilous highways for mail ships, and entire cities had been reduced to rubble, yet letters and parcels had to flow. Traditional mail systems, designed for peacetime efficiency, proved too slow and vulnerable. Necessity, as always in wartime, became the mother of invention, and the early failures of conventional postal networks spurred a wave of ingenious solutions that would forever transform how humans connected during crises. One of the most remarkable innovations was the concept of microfilm mail, which the United States military formalized as V-mail, or Victory Mail. This system converted handwritten letters into tiny photographic reproductions, often shrinking a standard letter to 1/30th of its original size. The microfilm reels could be transported efficiently across the Atlantic or Pacific, shielded from the dangers that imperiled conventional mail, such as submarine attacks or destroyed transport lines. Upon arrival at the destination, these letters were printed back onto standard-sized sheets and delivered to soldiers or civilians. The process drastically reduced cargo weight, sped delivery times, and ensured that even in the most remote outposts, personal correspondence could continue uninterrupted. V-mail was not merely a logistical triumph, it was a psychological lifeline, reinforcing the fragile morale of those living amidst the uncertainty and brutality of war. Alongside V-mail, military postal services introduced mobile sorting units, essentially fully operational post offices on wheels, capable of moving with advancing armies. In the deserts of North Africa, where armored divisions raced across hundreds of miles of sand, mobile units ensured that soldiers could send letters and receive parcels without returning to distant supply bases. In the dense forests and bombed-out villages of Europe, trucks retrofitted as sorting stations processed thousands of letters daily, keeping pace with armies that shifted positions at lightning speed. These mobile post offices often operated in perilous conditions, exposed to artillery, air raids, and the logistical chaos of active campaigns. Yet they succeeded in maintaining a continuous flow of mail, a remarkable feat of organizational planning and adaptability under fire. Air mail, once a novelty, became indispensable during the war. The ability to move letters and parcels across vast oceans in mere days rather than weeks was transformative. Transatlantic air routes were established to connect soldiers in Europe with families in North America, while Pacific air corridors linked dispersed island garrisons with command centers thousands of miles away. Airfields themselves became critical nodes in this network, often upgraded or constructed specifically to handle the volume of wartime correspondence. Pilots, frequently unarmed and flying over hostile territory, became silent heroes, transporting not only military orders but the emotional lifelines of tens of thousands of men and women. The hazards they faced, from enemy aircraft to unpredictable weather, underscored the immense courage required just to keep communication alive. The implementation of these innovations was not merely technological but also deeply human. Postal workers and military personnel coordinated tirelessly to ensure accuracy and timeliness. Letters were sorted according to front lines, units, and urgency, a meticulous operation where a single error could mean weeks of delay for anxious families. The psychological impact of timely delivery was profound. Receiving a letter could lift a soldier's spirit in the face of exhaustion, injury, or fear, while delays or losses could weigh heavily on morale. Civilian populations, too, adjusted to the new systems, learning to address V-mail letters correctly, understand microfilm formatting, and anticipate longer or altered delivery routes. It was a shared effort across continents, uniting military planners, postal clerks, pilots, and everyday citizens in a collective endeavor to maintain connection despite chaos. Innovation also extended to how packages were managed. Soldiers craved familiar comforts: cigarettes, chocolate, books, or letters from loved ones, yet shipping such items in bulk was nearly impossible given the demands of the war effort. Creative solutions included compressing parcels, prioritizing lightweight essentials, and coordinating international supply chains to ensure equitable distribution. Special envelopes and waterproof packaging were introduced to protect contents from moisture and damage during long voyages. In tropical theaters such as the Pacific Islands, these innovations were critical. Letters and parcels had to survive monsoon rains, high humidity, and the constant risk of enemy interference. Each successful delivery represented a triumph not only over distance but over the environmental and logistical obstacles that could have severed connections entirely. The war also inspired inventive approaches to circumvent enemy interference. In areas occupied by Axis powers, conventional postal routes were compromised, prompting the creation of clandestine delivery systems. Couriers operated at night, moving letters and parcels under the radar of occupying forces. In some cases, microfilm letters were hidden within seemingly mundane objects, such as packages of food or personal belongings, to evade inspection. These covert operations highlighted the intersection of innovation, intelligence, and sheer courage. Postal communication became a form of resistance, enabling information and hope to flow even under the most dangerous circumstances. Cultural and emotional resilience was entwined with these innovations. Soldiers reported that receiving V-mail or parcels provided comfort far beyond the material contents. It reinforced a sense of normalcy, human connection, and emotional stability. Families on the home front experienced similar reassurance, feeling that their loved ones were reachable despite the vast, perilous distances. Postal systems, through microfilm, mobile sorting, and air routes, became the arteries sustaining not just information but the emotional lifeblood of societies torn apart by war. In essence, these innovations blurred the lines between technology, logistics, and psychology, illustrating how communication infrastructure could serve both practical and deeply human needs simultaneously. Airmail and mobile units also played a strategic role. Beyond personal letters, they facilitated military orders, intelligence reports, and coordination among dispersed units. Rapid delivery of coded messages or operational plans often relied on the same infrastructure used for civilian correspondence, demonstrating the dual-purpose nature of these innovations. The ability to swiftly transmit instructions across continents could determine the outcome of battles, making postal and communication systems an integral component of military strategy. In this context, the act of sending a letter was not merely personal but a microcosm of the broader interplay between human connection, innovation, and strategic necessity. By 1942, the success of these systems had reshaped expectations about wartime communication. Soldiers became accustomed to receiving mail reliably even in remote theaters, families anticipated responses with greater predictability, and military planners recognized the value of investing in postal infrastructure. The convergence of technology, human ingenuity, and operational necessity had created a resilient communication network that could endure under the pressures of global conflict. V-mail, mobile sorting units, and air mail were no longer experimental, they were essential, ensuring that the world's largest war did not sever the human connections that gave it meaning. Ultimately, the innovations in postal and communication systems during World War II reflected a broader truth: even amid destruction, humanity finds ways to connect. The ingenuity behind V-mail, mobile sorting, and air transport was not just a triumph of technology but a testament to human determination, resourcefulness, and the unyielding need for contact with loved ones. Letters delivered across oceans, parcels arriving in flooded or bombed towns, and messages reaching soldiers in the most remote outposts all demonstrated that communication could survive, adapt, and even flourish under extreme circumstances. In the tapestry of war, these innovations were threads of continuity, ensuring that, despite the chaos, connection endured, and hope remained alive. Communication beyond letters, radio, telegraph, and intelligence. While letters and parcels maintain the personal lifeline between soldiers and home, World War II demanded a far more immediate and strategic form of communication. The battlefield had expanded across continents and oceans, requiring instant coordination that letters, microfilm, or even airmail could not provide. Military commanders, engineers, and intelligence officers turned to radio, telegraph, and telephone systems as the veins and arteries of modern warfare, creating networks that were both technological marvels and targets of relentless enemy attention. From the outset, armies recognized that traditional methods of communication were insufficient for the scale of operations unfolding in Europe, Africa, and the Pacific. Telegraph lines were still employed, but they were slow to install and easy to disrupt. Wired telephone systems existed in some urban and fortified areas, yet in forward battle zones, lines could be destroyed by artillery fire, sabotaged by enemy troops, or rendered useless by natural obstacles. The solution emerged in wireless communication, and radio technology, which had existed for decades, was rapidly adapted and expanded to meet wartime needs. Mobile radio units accompanied advancing units, from tanks rolling across the sands of North Africa to jeeps navigating the forests of Eastern Europe. These radios allowed commanders to relay orders over miles in real time, coordinate artillery strikes, and synchronize attacks with precision that had previously been impossible. Signal Corps became central to military operations, staffed by highly trained operators responsible for encoding, transmitting, and decoding messages under perilous conditions. In many theaters, these operators faced constant danger. A single intercepted radio transmission could reveal troop movements, supply routes, or tactical plans. Consequently, encryption was developed into a sophisticated art and science. Germany's Enigma machine, a marvel of mechanical and electrical engineering, allowed messages to be encoded with near-perfect complexity. The Allies responded by creating their own ciphers and, crucially, by investing in code-breaking operations. Bletchley Park in England became the nerve center of this effort, where mathematicians, linguists, and engineers worked tirelessly to decipher German communications. Their success, often achieved under intense secrecy, shifted the balance of battles by allowing Allied forces to anticipate enemy actions before they occurred. In addition to encoding, radio communication also faced deliberate interference. Both Axis and Allied forces employ jamming techniques to disrupt enemy transmissions, creating a constant game of cat and mouse in the electromagnetic spectrum. Portable radios were frequently adjusted in frequency and power to evade interception, while skilled operators developed shorthand signals and pre-arranged codes that could be transmitted under duress. The ability to maintain clear, secure communication could mean the difference between coordinated offense and chaotic retreat, between survival and annihilation. Telegraphy remained a crucial component of strategic communication, particularly for longer-distance coordination. Messages sent via telegraph could reach central command offices quickly, often faster than physical mail, and could be distributed to multiple units simultaneously. In the Pacific, where island bases were separated by thousands of miles of ocean, telegraphic communication ensured that naval fleets, air squadrons, and ground forces operated with a unified strategy. Similarly, in North Africa and the Middle East, telegraph lines connected forward positions to regional command centers, allowing commanders to track the movement of troops and supplies in real time. Despite its utility, telegraphy was vulnerable to interception and sabotage, requiring constant vigilance and the integration of encryption to preserve operational security. The intersection of communication and intelligence extended far beyond the battlefield. Resistance networks in occupied Europe relied heavily on radios, coded telegraphs, and covered messages delivered through clandestine couriers. In France, the Maquis and other resistance groups established secret radio stations that transmitted information about troop movements, supply depots, and German strategic intentions to London. Similar networks operated in the Netherlands, Poland, and Norway, linking ordinary civilians with military planners in ways that defied occupation authorities. Each transmission was a calculated risk. Radio operators and couriers faced the constant threat of capture, imprisonment, or execution. The very act of sending a message became a measure of courage, as vital for intelligence gathering as it was for morale. Naval operations relied heavily on secure communications, where the stakes could not have been higher. Convoys traversing the Atlantic to supply Britain, or fleets navigating the vast Pacific theater, depended on a combination of radio, signal flags, and coded messages. Submarines and destroyers, constantly on alert for enemy action, relied on rapid information exchange to avoid ambushes and coordinate attacks. The cryptographic security of these messages was paramount. Any breach could result in the loss of ships, lives, and strategic advantage. The challenge was compounded by environmental factors such as storms, rough seas, and atmospheric interference, which could disrupt even the most carefully maintained communication networks. Air operations, from the bombing campaigns over Germany to reconnaissance flights in the Pacific, also demonstrated the critical importance of radio and telegraphy. Pilots and ground crews relied on continuous feedback to adjust strategies, avoid hazards, and synchronize attacks. Portable radios in aircraft allowed real-time communication with command centers and other planes in formation, a technological leap that transformed air warfare. As planes grew faster and more sophisticated, communication systems evolved to meet new operational demands, integrating encryption, frequency hopping, and coordination protocols that were unprecedented in their complexity and scale. The human element remained central to all these technological systems. Operators, cryptographers, engineers, and messengers were tasked with ensuring that messages were accurate, timely, and secure, often under conditions of extreme stress. Mistakes could have catastrophic consequences, yet the dedication and skill of these individuals ensured the smooth functioning of complex networks. Training programs, standard operating procedures, and innovative engineering solutions combined to create resilient communication systems capable of withstanding the physical, environmental, and tactical pressures of global conflict. In the end, the expansion of radio, telegraph, and telephone systems during World War II was not merely about transmitting information, it was about preserving command, control, and coordination across an unprecedented scale of operations. These networks connected continents, synchronized multinational forces, and enabled the flow of intelligence that could alter the course of entire campaigns. They provided the backbone for resistance operations, naval coordination, and aerial strategy, and they transformed the concept of communication from a simple act of correspondence into a decisive instrument of war. The war's demands accelerated technological innovation in ways that would echo long after 1945. Portable radios, advanced encryption methods, and long-distance telegraphic coordination laid the groundwork for modern military communication systems, while the integration of human ingenuity with technology became a model for future conflict scenarios. Beyond the battlefield, these developments reshaped civilian communication, influencing post-war telecommunication infrastructure, emergency networks, and even international standards for secure message transmission. Ultimately, radio, telegraph, and telephone networks during World War II were as much about survival as strategy. They bridged vast distances, delivered vital intelligence, and maintained cohesion among dispersed forces. They empowered resistance movements, protected critical operations, and ensured that even in the most chaotic and dangerous circumstances, coordination, planning, and connection could endure. The story of these systems is not just one of wires and waves but of courage, ingenuity, and the relentless human need to communicate when it matters most. Enduring connections, legacy and unseen heroes of war communication. Amid the roar of artillery and the relentless advance of armies, there existed a quieter, often overlooked battlefield, the one of communication. While letters, radios, and telegraphs sustained the visible fronts, countless unseen efforts ensured that the lifeline of human connection endured. By the final years of World War II, the innovations and adaptations that had emerged under fire, many born of necessity, had achieved a remarkable level of sophistication, linking continents, fleets, islands, and resistance cells in ways previously unimaginable. These systems, often improvised and perilously maintained, left a legacy that would shape both military strategy and civilian communication for decades to come. One of the most intriguing and resilient methods of wartime correspondence was pigeon post, an ancient technique revitalized for modern conflict. Though primitive by technological standards, homing pigeons provided a reliable, silent means of transmitting messages when radio waves could be intercepted and traditional mail routes were compromised. In the fog of battle, particularly in Europe, Allied forces relied on these feathered couriers to carry vital intelligence across enemy lines, often from besieged cities or forward observation posts back to command centers. Each pigeon carried tiny capsules containing encrypted notes, and their successful delivery could mean the difference between the detection of an ambush and a devastating surprise attack. These birds were trained under extreme conditions, flown through storm, shell fire, and enemy occupation zones, embodying both the resourcefulness and desperation of wartime communication. Parallel to these avian couriers, human ingenuity manifested in the form of resistance couriers and clandestine networks. Across occupied France, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Eastern Europe, ordinary citizens risked their lives to transport messages, microfilm, and parcels. Operating under cover of night, often on bicycles or by foot, these couriers circumvented postal systems commandeered by occupying forces. They became integral to intelligence operations, feeding information on troop movements, fortifications, and supply lines to Allied command. Many of these couriers were teenagers, women, and elderly individuals, people who would be underestimated by the occupiers yet proved indispensable. Each successful journey was a small victory, an assertion of human courage and the unyielding desire to maintain communication against impossible odds. Naval communication remained another crucial yet highly perilous arena. The vast oceans of the Atlantic and Pacific posed unique challenges, demanding a combination of radio, semaphore, signal flags, and encrypted dispatches to coordinate convoys, fleets, and amphibious assaults. Submarines, both offensive and defensive, relied on the secrecy and speed of these communications, as a single intercepted signal could expose entire flotillas to destruction. The coordination of the D-Day landings, the Battle of Midway, and countless convoy operations depended on seamless communication, often facilitated by methods developed to adapt to the uncertainty and vast distances of global conflict. In these environments, technology alone was insufficient. Human judgment, training, and vigilance remained critical components of operational security. Beyond immediate operational necessity, these systems fostered a profound human and psychological impact. In the most isolated or besieged regions, the arrival of mail, whether delivered by pigeon, courier, or airdrop, represented hope, reassurance, and a tangible link to a world beyond the battlefield. The messages contained not only intelligence or strategic directives but also stories, photographs, and the simple affirmation that life persisted. Soldiers and civilians alike drew strength from the knowledge that someone, somewhere, had gone to extraordinary lengths to maintain a connection. The postal and communication innovations of World War II were as much about sustaining morale as executing strategy, demonstrating that human resilience often relied on the quiet, persistent work of delivering messages amid chaos. As the war drew to a close, the legacy of these innovations became increasingly evident. Systems devised for wartime expediency, V-mail microfilm, mobile post offices, encrypted radio networks, and resistance courier systems were studied, preserved, and adapted for post-war communication. Military forces around the world incorporated lessons learned into peacetime operations, developing rapid response communication units, long-distance encryption protocols, and resilient postal networks. The emphasis on redundancy, mobility, and security became standard practice, and the integration of technology with human ingenuity laid the groundwork for modern military and emergency communication systems. In essence, the war accelerated the evolution of global communication infrastructure, leaving behind techniques and strategies that would persist for decades. The civilian realm also benefited from the lessons of wartime innovation. Air mail networks, originally expanded to serve soldiers and command centers, were repurposed to connect commercial and personal correspondence more efficiently. Emergency messaging systems, developed to operate under duress, influenced disaster response protocols worldwide. Encryption and secure communication methods, honed in the high-stakes environment of wartime intelligence, eventually found application in banking, government, and international diplomacy. The human and technological creativity born of necessity during World War II demonstrated that adversity could drive profound advancements in communication that extended far beyond the immediate conflict. Finally, it is essential to recognize the unsung human heroes of this vast communication network. Postal workers, radio operators, pigeon handlers, couriers, cryptographers, and countless civilians labored tirelessly, often without recognition, to ensure that connections were maintained. Their work demanded courage, precision, and an unwavering commitment to the intangible yet vital goal of sustaining human links across the chaos of war. Each letter delivered, each message transmitted, each encrypted telegram successfully decoded was a small but meaningful contribution to both operational success and the preservation of humanity amidst unprecedented destruction. World War II revealed that communication is not merely a technical process, it is a lifeline, a strategic instrument, and a profoundly human enterprise. The innovations and systems developed under the pressures of war, air mail, V-mail, mobile sorting, radio networks, pigeon post, and clandestine couriers demonstrated the interplay between technology, ingenuity, and courage. They connected continents, synchronized operations, and sustained morale in a world fractured by conflict. The legacy of these systems endures not only in military doctrine and infrastructure but also in the recognition that even in the darkest hours, the human need to connect can inspire remarkable solutions. In a war defined by destruction, these communication networks represented continuity, resilience, and hope, the quiet, invisible threads that kept the world tethered together, one message at a time.